way. I believe that to be a revolutionary is to be a bold imaginary, to be a bold thinker, to imagine a new world. And I'm willing to imagine a world. There was a time when we didn't have police uh, guarding our communities, patrolling our communities. There was a time when we cared for ourselves. And so just on that basis alone, on that little small idea, I want to just, park and ask people to stop and to think, if this system, the way things are, there was a time it didn't exist, is there a time that it cannot exist again? And what would that look like? That's where we begin to imagine. And I think, we're within our rights in this society to dream and to dream big.
If I asked you to get a piece of paper and something to write with, and to make a numerical list of all the things that you would be willing to die for, how long is your list?
Panther 48.
Willing to die for.
Panther 48.
Willing to die for. How long is your list?
What is the tribal self?
Panther
The
48.
tribal self is what goes above the immediate acquaintances of the social.
Willing to die
The
for.
family, the people you know, live next door.
You would be willing
I'm
to
talking
die
about
for.
tribal self.
Panther 48.
I'm talking about those living, those yet unborn.
Peace and power. Once again, this is your Panther 48. Today we got a special guest with us. We didn't have the brother on once before, but today's discussion we're calling the psychological prison experience. And we felt that it would do it a great injustice if we didn't have a brother on who's actually working effectively and with great effort toward making changes in the prison system. The brother that we have on today as a guest is brother Robert Lilly. Peace and power, brother Rob.
Peace and blessing to you, Brother Syke, Brother E, Robert War. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening.
Could you, if you don't mind, brother, because we know your time is short because you got other engagements, and you did us a favor by coming on today. Could you get the listening audience, tell them a little something about yourself, a little bit about your background and the work that you do?
Yes, 100%. Let me just say, first of all, it's always an honor and a privilege to be in the presence of my peers. And so this evening, spending a bit of time with you all builds me up, even though I have other commitments. I feel it my responsibility when asked to be present to show up. So that's number one, first and foremost. Just say it like this: I'm 54 years of age. I just turned 54 on September 3rd. And I've spent approximately 21 years of my life inside an institution. Currently, I'm on parole until 2049. And should things remain the same and nothing change, I won't be able to participate in the electoral process until I'm 81 years of age. I am the face of mass incarceration. I say that because oftentimes when we talk about prison, we always want to hear those very extreme stories, somebody that's got a life sentence, or somebody who was wrongfully convicted, or somebody that was a serial killer. But the reality is every day, the average person, especially the average Black male in the African American community, finds themselves in the crosshairs of the criminal legal system because we live in impoverished communities that are oftentimes over-policed. And as a result of that, we have greater opportunity to have contact with law enforcement. And if there's contact with law enforcement, there's a potential for arrest. If there's an arrest, there's a likelihood of a trial or a plea agreement. And if there's an interaction with the court system, more than likely we're going to see imprisonment as a sentence instead of probation, which is oftentimes handed out to our fair-skinned people of this earth. That said, man, I want to give a more general face to what's happening with the prison legal system. I shared my story the way I did with 21 years of my life being swallowed up by the criminal legal system because truly I never intended to be a career, quote unquote, career criminal. As a youth, I was ensnared in the system. As a youth, I was I was exposed to alcohol and drugs, which only inflamed the issues that were going on in my community and in my home. And as a result of that, our society, instead of dealing with the root causes of these problems, we prefer a very easy answer, which is control. So prisons are about control, and it's that control that I'm living today to resist.
So can you tell the people a little bit about what made you make the changes that you made? Why do you work against prison? Why do you and what made you start building in the first place? What made you
All right.
start seeking that knowledge?
That's a good question. So, number one, first and foremost, I'm a prison abolitionist. And that basically, and I was an abolitionist before I even understood what an abolitionist was. Once I read history and I saw that historically, Black people had been bought and sold. And mind you, as a youth, I didn't know about anything about slavery. I didn't learn about slavery until I got to federal prison in my 20s, and I began to ask people questions because I didn't think to read the books. I was like, well, let me just ask other people because surely older people would know. I got all these spurious answers that were all over the map. I got answers that were condemning us as being complicit in our own enslavement. I got answers that were fanciful. I mean, it was just all over the board. And I realized, you know what, if I'm going to learn anything about history, I need to read. So I began to read. And when I read, it was clear to me I didn't even have to be a profound thinker to see that what was happening in my time was a reflection of the legacy, the long legacy of oppression that existed after the enslavement of our people and the so-called Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment. The reality is that this society has a weird relationship with our people. That relationship is predicated on the need to control, and you can look at it through an economic lens, you can look at it through a spiritual lens, whichever lens you choose to look at it through. The bottom line was that what I saw happening in my generation, born in the 1970s, raised in the 80s, a child of the product of the 90s, I saw the beginnings of mass incarceration before there was a term for mass incarceration, and I knew it was problematic. So if what was going on today, and let me mention this other thing, because I want to mention this since I'm on the Panther 48 show. I came across some articles written by revolutionaries that had been entombed in the federal prisons. They were circulating these documents that were just going throughout the prison. And I remember reading one brother's, I don't know if it was Mutulu or somebody, and I didn't even know who these figures were, but their articles were still being transferred through person to person in the prison system. And I came across one, and the brothers had a really sharp political analysis about America, and they were oftentimes equating America, making it synonymous with slavery as it related to our people. It was a no-brainer that what's happening today with prisons is in fact tantamount to slavery. And if the only solution for slavery then was not compromise, but abolition, then the only solution today for what's happening with prisons in our community is abolition of the current state of affairs, the current way that we are engaging in harm in our community, and the current way that we are addressing those that cause harm in our community.
And I want to ask a question also for the listening audience. If when you say abolition, what are you saying? Are you saying the complete elimination of prisons? And what would be the process of that in your
Okay.
thinking?
First of all, that's a very big question, but I'm going to
Yes.
be very candid and I'm going to say I believe that there's no redeemable value in prisons, period. I believe that accountability is a need. Like we can't live in a society where people harm each other and there is no accountability. But I believe also that the current manifestation of what we call crime and quote unquote punishment is antithetical to a civilized society. It is dangerous and problematic for Black people, particularly. And it is on that basis alone that I'm totally opposed to the current state of affairs, where we believe the only solution to quote unquote crime in our community is to punish people and to entomb them in cages and strip them of their rights and their humanity. So I'm opposed to that system. Now, the other question, which is a much lengthier answer, which I cannot answer in brevity, is to say that I'll say it this way. I believe that to be a revolutionary is to be a bold imaginary, to be a bold thinker, to imagine a new world. And I'm willing to imagine a world. There was a time when we didn't have police uh, guarding our communities, patrolling our communities. There was a time when we cared for ourselves. And so just on that basis alone, on that little small idea, I want to just park and ask people to stop and to think. If this system, the way things are, there was a time it didn't exist, Is there a time that it cannot exist again? And what would that look like? That's where we begin to imagine. And I think, we're within our rights in this society to dream and to dream big.
True indeed. True indeed. I know that you got to get ready to go, brother. So I got one more question I want to ask you. Can you tell us a little bit about the event in Chicago? You know what it is, who's putting it together, and the purpose of it.
Yeah. So before I mention that really quick, because I skipped one question you asked me, why this work?
Yes.
I heard a minister say once that your ministry grows out of the context of your crisis. Here it is, I'm a black man in America who has barely even tasted what it means to be free in a society that lauds itself for being the bastion of freedom. So there's a contradiction here in my life that I can't sit peacefully with, right? So having so much of my life being circumscribed by the carceral systems of this society, the penological systems of this society, I'm wrestling because this society wants me to believe that everything that's transpired in my life is the product of a choice. But we seldom ever look at the society itself as being the seedbed for the harm that's occurring in our lives and in our communities. So I'm going to pause there and simply say, I'm doing this work because I believe that what's happening today is an injustice. It is an injustice that's long, the train of it is long and goes back, far in history. And we are just a continuation of that struggle. And this is my part to play in it. That said, this trip that I'm going on, and I'm bringing about 7 people from the state of Texas with me, is for this one express purpose. This last time I went to prison, I was 49 years of age. I was sentenced to 30 years. I was faced with habitual category of offense because I had 3 felonies. I was looking at what would be tantamount to a 3-strike shot. Texas doesn't have 3 strikes, but they do have habitual offender. So that means you're at minimum going to be facing 25 years, at maximum life. So that meant I was looking at the possibility of life for a 3rd-degree felony. When my first felony was over 20 years in the past. So as I sat through this process, I remember wrestling with, what does all this mean? How did we ever get to a place where time became the equivalency of punishment? How do we ever get to a place where sending someone to a cage, calling it debt, is being paid to the society? How? So as I wrestle with all of this, particularly the fact that I was sentenced to this outrageous number of years, 30 years, I began to look around and read other books. I read a book by Mark Maurer called The Meaning of Life, and it's about LWOP, life without parole. And I began to see the comparison between my life, which was seemingly inconsequential to these people, and the lives of other people that they had thrown away and said no chance of parole. So it made me look for people in prison that had life sentences, begin to engage with them. And I saw some of the most beautiful, contrite people. Those who had actually harmed others were truly remorseful and wanted to find a new way forward with their lives. And then there were others, that had given up and they were in despair. And I just remember thinking, you know what, I don't know when I'm coming home, but I'm going to go home. And what then? I cannot abide the idea that I come home from prison and just create a normal life or a seemingly normal life and forget the people that I left behind in that prison. I got to remember those brothers, man. I remember, crying for some men that I met, feeling great pain because I knew this person who, for all intents and purposes, they had made every effort that they could to change themselves, and they were an asset to other people in the prison, and there's no pathway for them to freedom. That's not right, man. We have parole in the state of Texas, and in the state of Texas, in any state that there's parole, it is based on the presumption that someone can change, right? So if we believe that people can harm and people can change, it's either we believe in change or we don't believe in change. Either we believe in the idea that somebody can rebuild their lives and find a way to coexist in this world with others, or we don't. And so we live in a contradictory society that keeps telling us on one hand forgiveness, but on the other hand there's condemnation and exclusion and alienation. And so parole right now, and this is one of a number of issues that I've latched onto as growing out of my own desire for change in my own life and in the lives of people like me. Parole, when I got to prison, I didn't even know how to get out. Now we have parole. So I asked a simple question, well, somebody tell me, how do you trigger the parole board to say yes? And I got, like before with history about slavery, I got every answer under the sun. Literally, nobody knew how to get out. And they wouldn't say they didn't know. They would say some bullshit like, hey, man, don't get no cases. Man, because they don't want if you don't get cases, you're going to show them that you're transformed. Then another guy would say, man, you got to at least get one minor case, or they're going to think you manipulating the system. Then another guy would say, man, go get some certificates. You can get you some certificates and they'll see that you're educated and you're really practicing rehabilitation. And another guy said, well, I ain't just getting certificates. I'm going to get Bible certificates. And he shows you a stack of 100 Bible certificates. And each one of these people get denied, 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 denied. And so we're all guessing. We don't know how to get out of prison. And so what I started doing was I started researching prison parole reform movements. And I saw all around the country there are similar problems. So I decided I want to participate in this conversation. And so I did a panel discussion like we're doing tonight with an organization called the National Parole Transformation Project. I was able to gain some favor with this organization that is under the umbrella of the MacArthur Center for Justice. And through that relationship with one of their leaders named Timmy Chow, I was able to secure some resources that allowed me to facilitate persons here in Texas to travel with me to Chicago for this conference called Realizing Release. Parole is the only mechanism that people can get out of prison unless their cases are overturned or they go out in a body bag. We've got to do better in the state of Texas looking at what it means to have a system that's fair, that actually has rules that they abide by. If that cannot be achieved, I can't see any other pathway for these men and women to come home. So we're going down there to learn, we're going down there to network, and we're going down there to begin to see ourselves in the faces of other outstanding men and women who are just like us, who are making some phenomenal moves. One of the most impressive things I recently learned while I was on our preparation call for this conference was of a young lady and her group that are going to the United Nations and to other universal plebiscites to talk about the hypocrisy of America, the same way Malcolm historically showed hypocrisy to America for racism. We're today pointing out hypocrisy to America as it relates to parole and the need for reform. I'm going to yield there. I think I've extended myself a little bit longer than I desired to, but as I said, this is a very important conversation, and I'm so grateful that you fellas are having this and educating other people in our community, because we keep waiting for somebody to come and save us. We are our own saviors. We got to start working to help ourselves. And that means getting educated about the issues that are plaguing our community and beginning to work together, which is what I'm trying to demonstrate by bringing these folk who some of us know each other and some don't. But the goal is for all of us to begin to come back to Texas after this conference and carve a new path out for ourselves as it relates to parole reform and a number of other issues that we'll decide amongst ourselves that we'll tackle.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you very much. I know you got to get going, and we greatly appreciate you for coming on the show and dropping those jewels, brother.
Man, I bid all of you peace, man. I appreciate your long legacy of struggle in our community. It's because of brothers like you, Brother War, Brother E, that brothers like myself even got infected with this idea of becoming politically conscious. So thank you for what you're doing to keep that message alive in our community. You're sorely needed, my brothers. Y'all have a blessed evening, man.
All right, you
too,
too,
brother.
comrade.
Peace and power.
Peace.